Hello YouTube! Today I'd like to show you my homemade N7 breather helmet I made to match my N7 armor cosplay. The helmet was 3D printed, assembled and painted manually. I also added some electronics and a bit of interactivity, so you can control the flashing of the lights with your voice. From start to finish, the project took exactly 2 weeks. It was quite time-consuming, but in the end I think it was worth it. How did I make it? Before I start, I want to give a huge shout-out to Killonious and Jace1969. They were the original creators of the 3D model I used to print the helmet. Jace modeled the first version of it in 2016 and posted it on Thingiverse. Then Killonious made a more detailed remix of the model and sliced it into smaller pieces suitable for 3D printing. They both released the models for free on Thingiverse, so anyone can download and print them. Links can be found in the video description. Huge love to you guys, you are the backbones of the global Mass Effect cosplay community. I didn't really have to make much changes to the Killonious model. I only added 4 extra holes for the planned lights, and I also scaled the model down to 85%. At full scale it would be way too big and 85% fits me perfectly. But if your head is particularly big or you have big ears, you might want to go with 90% scale. I printed the model out of black PLA plastic. The printing of all the parts took around 55 or 60 hours, and together with the supports I used around 800 grams of filament. After the supports were removed, the whole helmet weighed 550 grams. Immediately after the printing, I gathered all the parts and temporarily glued them together with some masking tape to check how the whole thing would look like. The printed parts needed some sanding and cleaning. I used 3 different tools for that. My electric oscillating sander for flat surfaces, a nail file for smaller details and hard to get creases, and some regular sandpaper. I used the grades 120, 180 and 240, and there was no need to go any higher at this stage because I was planning to use some filler later. In hindsight, I should a bit of more time into the sanding here, but sanding PLA is really tough. And go too soft and you cannot even notice any change, or go too hard and the plastic starts to melt into a soft goo. To glue the parts together, I used the German UHU extra gel glue. From my experience, it is one of the few glue types I know to reliably glue PLA parts together. Chemically, it is a transparent variant of a polyvinyl acetate glue. It's the same substance that is usually the base of the common white wood glue. After drying, the glue stays transparent. According to the manufacturer, it should get rock solid after around 24 hours, but in my experience it was still quite elastic even after 2 days. That's why in the weakest parts of the helmet I also additionally used some epoxy resin glue. The glue needed a few hours to get its full strength, so I couldn't just hold it steady with just my hands. That's why I used some strong neodymium magnets, office clips, and rubber bands to hold the parts together while they were drying. This system worked relatively well and held the helmet together, although coming up with the correct setup required some creativity on my part. After the whole helmet was glued, I needed to sand down all the joints. I didn't worry too much at this stage, since I planned to later use some spray on filler. For the first layer, I used black acrylic primer. I mostly used it because I don't really trust PLA to hold the filler, and I also wanted to properly seal the joints and to protect the glue. The paint I would use later had some quite aggressive solvents mixed in, and those solvents included acetone, which would immediately dissolve the glue I used. After the primer, it was time for the filler. I hoped I would be able to put at least 3 layers of the filler on my helmet, but unfortunately the can only lasted for 1.5 layers, and I only had 1 can at hand. Because of that, it didn't really fill all the creases as well as I hoped for, but I think it was close enough. I also must say that I kinda like the look of the helmet in white. The filler was sanded down and it left a very nice and smooth finish. For the third layer, I used the black primer again, since during the sanding I exposed the glue and bare PLA a bit. Now I would start to add the different colors, so it was time to do some masking. To do so, I used yellow masking tape, although it left some nasty residue on the helmet, so probably the blue painter's tape would be a better choice. The masked helmet was ready for the final coating of matte black enamel. I wanted the helmet to match the rest of the cosplay, so I used the exact same color as the EVA foam used for my N7 armor. I used the same type of enamel for the red strip, although this one was not matte but shiny. You have to be really patient putting the paint on. Use very thin layers, and after every layer leave it to dry for at least a few hours. If you rush it too much, the enamel will make some nasty bubbles, and the paint will soak underneath the masking tape. Lastly, I wanted my helmet to have the same texture as my N7 armor. I was trying to find the easy way to do it for like a week. Finally, I developed a workflow that actually worked. I modeled a similar texture in SketchUp and 3D printed it out of flexible TPU filament. After masking, I would use some water-soluble paper glue to attach the printed templates to the helmet. The paper glue held the template strong enough for painting, and later it could easily be removed with a damp towel. To paint the texture, I also used black paint, but this time it was glossy, not matte. To my surprise, it actually worked. The texture looked really nice, and it matches the rest of the armor very well. In the end, I painted the N7 logo with white and red acrylic paint. I equipped the helmet with some electronics. I can turn on the electronics with the switch hidden under my chin. With another switch I can turn on the fan to cool down my face and prevent the visor from fogging up. With the knob behind my ear I can dim the lights, or I can make them brighter. I can also switch them into the experimental Quarian mode, so now they blink whenever I speak. Killa Selai. Everything is programmed with an Arduino Nano board, the brightness of the lamps is controlled with a potentiometer, and the voice is detected by a small electret microphone. I programmed the voice detection to prepare myself for the Tali helmet I will be preparing sometime soon.
Report to the ship as soon as possible. We'll bang, okay?
The light fixtures were modeled in SketchUp and they were 3D printed out of transparent filament. Inside of the helmet there was plenty of space to hide all the electronics and all the cables. Whenever I want to update the software to add new functionality, I can connect the helmet to the computer via a USB cable. To fit the helmet, I used some soft foam to hold my head in place. I painted the foam black so it doesn't stand out too much when you look at it from the outside. The 5 pieces of foam hold the helmet really steady and provide enough space for ventilation. The last element to make was the visor. Based on the 3D model, I printed a paper template of the visor and then glued it on top of a piece of PET plastic. The sheet of PET I used was 0.5 mm thick. I then manually cut out the visor and glued it in place with UHU glue. So, I think that's all I have to show you today. It was a lot of fun making this helmet, and even though it was really labor intensive, in the end it was all worth it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.